Welcome back to Gript. You may have heard that the IMF has just labelled Ireland a tax haven. To find out why, we've invited back business correspondent for the New York Post, Aidan Byrne. So, John, thanks very much for being with us again. And so,
Great to be here.
can you explain to us why is it the IMF has labelled us and other countries as tax havens? I think it's in light of the corporate tax situation that we offer. Is that correct?
Well, the IMF study identified what is known as phantom profits booked in jurisdictions like Ireland and the British Virgin Islands. And they've calculated that something in the region of 40% of the revenues and taxes of these multinationals is intangible. I mean, it's not real assets in these countries, but it's booked um, in jurisdictions like Ireland. I think the total of FDI worldwide is in the region of 40 trillion, and something like 40% of that is phantom. And Ireland and several other jurisdictions, the British Virgin Islands, accounts for the bulk of those phantom profits. So basically, they set up shell corporations in countries like Ireland, book the revenues, but there's no real economic activity other than bookkeeping and registrations and interactions with the the domestic treasury. So that's really what they were alluding to. It's the scale of it probably has shocked a lot of people. Nobody was surprised that there are these phantom profits, being funneled through various countries. But the 40% figure, I think, had people scratching their heads.
And so essentially, can we conclude that there's very little spin off for the average citizen in the country in terms of tax receipts from those corporate profits that are being hidden here?
Well, I think we have to put it all into perspective. It would be reckless to say that there's no benefit to countries like Ireland from FDI, multinational corporations and foreign companies coming in and setting up brick and mortar operations. There are clearly brick and mortar operations from several of these big companies. I mean, just look at the digital docs in Dublin and so on. I'm not exactly clear on the full numbers, to keep changing, but there are at least in the region of 180,000 jobs created as a result of this FDI investment in Ireland, and I'm sure twice as much indirectly. Um, it's the phantom profits, the profits that are booked in Ireland and other countries that don't generate any economic activity, that is the challenge. And that's what we should be worried about. And it's the opaqueness of it.
Is it likely that the corporation tax arrangements in Ireland and other countries are going to change? Because I know that's been something talked about on a global level.
Well, I think this just accelerates the focus on this FDI. The OECD has been looking very closely at it, and next month they publish their first draft proposal on reforming digital taxation globally. And I've spoken to some experts on this, and in their view, the Ireland's corporate tax rate of 12.5% probably is not going to hold in the long term. There's going to be some minimum global taxation which will be above the 12.5%, and that could hurt Ireland clearly in the long run. You got to look at where Ireland has come from on FDI. Back in the 1980s, Ireland's corporate tax rate was a staggering 50% or so. And it was enlightened, in fairness, policy by the government, IDA and so on. They reduced it to today's 12.5%. But, history and time has caught up with Ireland because the rest of the world started to lower their rates as well. The US has brought its rate down, and various other countries, around the world have done similar things. Globally, it's now at 25.5%. The US brought theirs down from 35 to 21%. So it's kind of a race to the bottom. And I spoke earlier in the week to a global indirect tax expert, Peter Asquith at Avalara in London. And he said, in his view, and he had studied this very closely, the OEC proposal will likely force Ireland to raise its corporate income tax rate. So there's a lot of nervousness and skittishness clearly at government level that this, this honeymoon, if you will, this great period of FDI could be closing in on the government, and they will have to look at new ways to attract foreign companies other than offering opportunities, massive opportunities. The numbers are huge, obviously, for countries like Ireland. As I said, we're among 10 countries that account for the vast majority of phantom profits booked worldwide. Ireland's one of the leading nations in that. So it will have to look at renewed areas. And if you go onto the IDA website, it's pretty significant that one of the things that they highlight clearly on that website is Ireland's attractiveness on the 12.5% corporate tax rate. That's likely to change. That's what most people feel. So that day may be nearing, and people should be worried about that.
And one of the things that's really amazed people here is that a European competition authority said Apple owed our country some 14 billion euros, but our own government decided to challenge that in the courts, so it's currently being heard. And the government has spent almost 7 million euros now at this point already on that court case. Can you shed any light on that? Because it seems an extraordinary situation that the government is unwilling to take the 14 billion that it's owed by Apple.
Well, it's sort of counterintuitive that they don't take the money, given Ireland's growing national debt of over 200 billion in a world, drowning in global debt. The reasoning put forward by the government is that they want to preserve their national and sovereign integrity as a safe haven for FDI and a place where they can come in and take advantage of its, very low corporate tax rate. So if it was seen to take that money out of escrow where it is at the moment, then companies like Apple and others would say the jig is up. It's no longer a guarantee that we can come in and set up here, get our 12.5%, and do all kinds of, creative accounting maneuvers. Because sometimes it's not 12.5%, as we know. It can be as low as 2%. And that was the issue in the Apple case, that it wasn't 12.5%, that they were doing other clever, creative financial engineering maneuvers and got it down to 2%. The government has denied that. They have denied that there was any sweetheart deal. And they said, no, this belongs to Apple. Apple says, no, sweetheart deal with Apple. So if they are forced to give the money back, it will make companies like Apple and other multinationals reconsider Ireland as a destination for foreign direct investment. This could drag on for 10 years. We don't know, but you think about it, it's a lot of money. It could pay down a lot of infrastructure bills, national debt for the Children's Hospital in Dublin. And who knows, maybe the whole international global tax regime will have changed so radically then that we will no longer take advantage of 12.5%. And the government may say, we'll take this check. This is going to pay off an awful lot of debt.
Yeah, it's very questionable as to whose interest they're acting in as our government. But John, where can people follow your work? We know you write in the New York Post. Where else? I think you started a new podcast as well.
Yeah, I started a podcast. It's called Life on Planet Earth, Hope for Our Existential Crisis. My first inaugural interview was with David Quinn of the Iona Institute in Dublin. And I just, in memory of 9/11, I interviewed a legendary trader on the New York Stock Exchange floor, Peter Tuchman. He's the most photographed trader on Wall Street, and he's the son of Holocaust survivors. So he talks about the promise of American freedom and the great dream, and about man versus machine on the New York Stock Exchange.
Great. And people can get that on their iPhones or by visiting a particular website?
They can go to Spotify or any of the good platforms.
Great. John, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you, Tim.